couple of weeks ago, when I was away, usually when I go away I get about as far from church as I possibly can. A couple of weeks ago I didn't do that. I went to the Menlo Park Presbyterian Church, largest Presbyterian church, certainly west of the Mississippi. There are a couple of bigger ones in south, in Atlanta. But it's about 4,300 members. My cousin goes there, and I was visiting with him, so I went with him one day. And you walk in, and there are 7 screens throughout the fairly traditional sanctuary. They're hanging in front of the balcony and 2 sides in the back of the chancel, and then they've got sort of transoms on either side, and there's screens there to make sure that everybody can see who can't maybe see around and see to the front. And they've got a full band. In fact, they've got a big drum set, but it's in a shell, because if the drum set were to actually play, it would kind of fill the place a little too much. And it's a hopping place. Of course, they have the obligatory blonde helping you sing songs. And so you start with what I call 7-11 songs. You know, it's 7 words 11 times. But then we broke into full rock versions of first Holy, Holy, Holy. Oh, what an experience. It was really quite something. And then Stand Up for Jesus. You know, and I got to tell you, by the end of those songs, you felt like you were transported to some place. It's a different kind of transported than we are here after we've chanted for a while in the morning. Partly, I'm wanting to expand the chant slowly but surely, because you do become transported to another place of spirit in the midst of chant. That's why we do it. So I can understand how they can call themselves Christians and I can call myself a Christian. It makes all the sense in the world. Except for the fact that up on those big screens when I walked in was one giant word: sin. All 7 screens. And it was the lead out for a series of sermons apparently they were going to have on what they referred to as the little sins. Okay, so not the big sins. Big sins, I suppose, would be, murder and, adultery. Those are the big ones, I think. They kind of are about equal in the evangelical church, wouldn't you say? So sin is up there, and the idea was that we were supposed to pay attention to the little ones, to the greed, the lack of gratitude, to all the little sins, because if we pay attention to the little ones, we'll be formed, and the big ones will kind of take care of itself. It's sort of the Rudy Giuliani approach to the Christian life. Okay, you remember Giuliani when he was mayor of New York, he decided if he gave out lots of tickets for jaywalking and littering, that the murder rate would take care of itself. Trouble is it worked. In any case, we were told that we had to pay attention to these little sins, but no grace. Not one word of grace in the sermon. And I was just a little stunned. It's like, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it. I keep saying to my students in preaching class who have a way of wanting to tell us all what to do, the problem is not that we don't know what to do. The problem is that we don't know how to do it. And so grace becomes essential, that we understand that the gospel is that God is unfolding and working within us to grow and develop and to become more at peace with the world around us. So anyway, it's very clear that Christianity is not monolithic, right? Well, the same is true of the other group of people that I'm talking about today in Resonance and Dissonance, and that's atheists. Not exactly a monolithic group of people. I mean, you have the extremists in atheism. And at times it almost sounds absurd. I'll read you a definition of atheism that came up this week. It's the belief that there was nothing and then nothing happened to nothing, and then nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything, and then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into self-replicating bits, which then turned into dinosaurs. It's funny to think of it that way, but people, are going to ascribe, some folks, to randomness. That it's all about randomness. It has no purpose. It's going in no direction. And that particular view of atheism seems to lose its sense the bigger the universe gets. As the universe gets bigger and bigger and bigger, our minds are blown and we change our views about what's possible with God. The universe has to be pretty small for you to think that things are all random. For in 13.7 billion years, for it to get randomly from nothing to, Shakespeare. So there are those extremists, and that point of view can be very sad. Because when you think about it, it leaves you in a place where you have no purpose to live. Why are we alive? I don't know. It's random. Doesn't matter. What should I do? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's all random anyway. So you're going to do whatever you're randomly charged up to do in any given moment. Like billiard balls, you're going to bump one into the other and react, and that's just how life is. No real point to it all. Now, I'm not saying that people that take that point of view are immoral. Okay? I'm just saying that the point of view itself becomes amoral and lacks purpose. And, quite a number of people from that point of view are actually very moral people because they were brought up by good Christian folk or good Hindu folk or good Buddhist folk. Because somewhere along the line, somebody with some grounding and with some purpose laid out how you live. And they lived within it, but others kind of fall apart because without any real purpose outside, bigger than yourself, right, you have a way of hanging on to things that can hurt you just to sort of make you feel alive. That's true for people of faith and not of faith. When we're shaky, when we feel as though we haven't lived into our purpose, that life isn't moving in the direction it needs to, we have a way of latching on to things that in the end will hurt us. Everybody's addicted to something. What's yours? There's another group of atheists that are they're less strident. All right? And they're the group a little bit like, a little bit like Iris DeMent, who wrote this song, Let the Mystery Be. Like, she takes a look at it and she says, don't get the purpose, the whole thing is just ridiculous, so I'm just letting go of it all. Let the mystery be. And there are a lot of people in the world like that. They're kind of first cousins to the agnostics, the people that thoughtfully say, I don't know, I can't possibly know, so I give up. All right? Some people just write it off, and some people write it off with knowledge and forethought. They're first cousins there, but those atheists, they live in the mystery, and they, too, live without a rudder to keep them strong, unless they'd been given a rudder at another time in another place. At least that's the tendency. They don't rely on the grace of God to move them and help them to grow. That's the second kind of atheist. And that to me is kind of sad because it's the confusion of, we've sort of taken apart and deconstructed our very traditional faith, and we leave an awful lot of folks in this, spiritual wasteland where there doesn't seem to be a purpose that you can articulate and hang on to that makes any intelligible sense. It's where the church has really fallen flat on its face. And so people are left without that. And I think it's a reason why many extremely bright and forward-thinking people remain in the evangelical faith. I think they open their eyes, they look over the edge into the deconstructed spiritual abyss, and they say, that is not for me. And since they don't have a real awareness, since the church has failed at creating something that really has teeth to it on the other side, they just stay where they are. At least that was my experience. I think it's my cousin's experience. Happens to a lot of folks. That's anecdotal, I recognize. There's another kind of atheist, and the first two kinds, there's an awful lot of dissonance between them and Christianity, because they're not hanging on to a God that has a particular character, that moves in a particular way. They just don't have that. So there's a lot of dissonance. But this third kind of atheist, there's a lot of resonance with what we'll call progressive Christianity. So atheism, let's talk about the definition a little bit. So atheism means against or not theism. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, what is theism? Right? And theism is the belief in a God that is outside creation. Okay? A belief in a God that is outside the creation, that when you pray to this God might intervene in creation. This God might reach in and fool around and change things or not change things, as the case may be. And so an atheism is to say, I don't believe in any such God. I don't believe in a God that looks at the entirety of creation, including time, and stands outside it. So the person that rejects this theistic God, for instance, is going to say that the future isn't here yet. The theist thinks that the future was created, that all time has already been created in the sovereignty of that external God. But the atheist isn't going to say that. They're going to reject that theist interpretation of God. And they're going to say, no, I'm an atheist. I see a different kind of God. And there's lots of different ways that they can describe that God. One is a pantheistic God, that is to say, a God who is creation. So some folks in religious traditions say, yeah, God is creation, so you are God, everything's God. Right? There's no separation between us and God. And another, which is becoming, how shall I put this? It's coming to focus in a progressive Christian environment, is panentheism, which is to say that God and creation are not the same, but you cannot tease them apart. You can't pull them apart, so that means that you're never alone. The presence of God that is unfolding creation is always within you. You need only quiet your heart and know that the presence is there. Now this kind of atheist, many of the spiritual but not religious would certainly hold in here. This kind of atheist has a lot of resonance with me. In fact, some of you remember I actually wrote something controversial. It's hard for me to write something controversial in this church. But I managed to do it at Christmas time. I went through that definition of atheism as being against theism, and I said, well, I'm not a theist. I reject the theist interpretation of God, so I guess that makes me an atheist pastor. But it's that third kind of atheism. That recognition that God is within and around us, that God is moving within and around us, that we can't tease it apart. And therefore we can't lay it off on a God who lets suffering happen. We can't lay it off on a God who won't save this kind of person or that kind of person. I mean, that's all the theist God that we can let go of. But we Christians bring something to the table, to the conversation. We bring something to the conversation, to the atheist, because we have a tradition that gives us a sense of who this God is and how this God works in the world. And this God is a God of deep and passionate love. The kind of love that puts value into you each step and each way in every day. This is not a God that you wonder what its character is. It is always moving us towards greater relation, towards greater closeness, and more open care. This is a God whose love knows no boundaries and who is living out the expansion of that love in each and every one of us. That's the God we come to know in the Scriptures. Oh, I know, they described it in theistic terms. That was their worldview. That's what they knew about God. But the experience they were having of a God unfolding the love of God within them, it's the same experience we have today. The same one we reach for and we discipline ourselves to live out. So people ask me sometimes, what do I say when I'm talking to an atheist? What do you say? Well, the first thing I usually say to folks is, you don't tell them anything. You ask questions. That's the only way to enter into religious conversation anyway, is to ask questions. Because if you tell people things, you just lay it out without any context, well, then it feels like you're saying I'm right and the other person has nothing to offer, so maybe we ask a question. Well, okay, an atheist doesn't believe in God, so what is the God that you've imagined that you don't believe in? It's a great place to start. Because usually what you're going to find at the end of the person answering that question is that you don't believe in that God either. It's a point of agreement, not a point of disagreement. All right? And you begin asking questions. Well, is the God that you're worshiping, suppose somebody has another point of view, a way of looking at God. Then the question is that way of looking at God working for you? Is it enabling you to grow and develop and become a more whole person? And here's where the non-arrogant Christian has the real moment. If the answer to the question is yes, my God is serving me, this God that I've been worshiping, this God that I've been knowing and developing with is serving, if that's the answer to the question, then I say, Alleluia. There's no reason to make them a Christian. You might learn something from them. I don't happen to think the God that I worship does it all for me. I think I've got it wrong in some ways. If I knew what they were, I'd change, okay? So I need other people to describe to me how I might grow and develop more if I were to think of God in different ways. I can only do that if I open my heart to each person I see and say, how's it working for you? Share with them what I've learned. Listen to them as they share with me what they've learned. There's a lot of resonance between Christians and Jews, between Christians and Hindus, between Christians and Buddhists, between Christians and Confucians and shamanism. There's a lot of resonance in all these things. That doesn't mean they're the same thing. They're not. It doesn't mean we don't have something unique to offer the conversation. We do. But God is working in the midst of all of it. God is working to carry this creation, this humanity, into a place where we are more and more related, where God's love is expressed more and more one to another.